So, hello and welcome to another episode of Interviews with Experts. You may have heard about the first vaccine for honeybees approved by the United States Department of Agriculture. This could pave the way for controlling a range of viruses. Dallin Animal Health is based in Athens, Georgia, and Dallin's honeybee vaccine was named to Time's 2023 Best Inventions list in recognition of the world's first honeybee vaccine and recognized as an extraordinary innovation. Today, I interview three members of the Dallin Animal Health team so we can learn more about how a bee vaccine can protect your honeybees. I'm Frederick Dunn, and this is The Way to Be. All right, so hello to everyone. I want to thank you for being here today. And you're connecting with me from different parts of the country, so I find that to be very interesting, and I want to thank you for your time. And if we could please just go around, I'd like you to introduce yourself, where you're located, and what your current job is with Nalin? Okay. All right, so we'll start with you, Annette. Please introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Well, first of all, thank you for having us. It's really great to be on your show. My name is Annette Kneiser, and I am the CEO of Dallin Animal Health. And I am located in Athens, Georgia, where the headquarters of the company is.
Oh, great. Thank you and welcome. Nate?
Hi, I'm Nate. I'm located in Central Maryland here, run a small apiary, and I'm in beekeeper relations and do a bit of field research and field data collecting for us. So wear a few different hats, but primarily working with beekeepers and trying to figure out exactly how this fits into their operation.
Okay, fantastic. Amy?
Hi, I'm Amy Floyd, and I am located in Northern Arizona in Flagstaff. And I am our regional manager and head of beekeeper relations. And I do a lot of our outreach, working, going to conferences and visiting beekeepers and teaching them how to incorporate the vaccine into their operation and just building those relationships.
Okay, great. So thank you and welcome again. By the way, Flagstaff, Arizona, I used to live there.
Yeah.
My mother taught there, and I lived on San Francisco Street. So I was a
Oh,
free range child right at the edge of the forest there.
yeah.
So, okay, and that's what we're here to talk about, I'm sure. I have a list of questions. Now, here's the thing. Beekeepers hear vaccine, and a lot of them just go, whoa, no, not my bees. I don't want that happening at all. I don't care what it's for. Vaccines are bad. So what we hope to do today is talk about that a little bit and understand what a vaccine is, how it's going to benefit our bees, and why we even need it to begin with. So I'm actually going to start with Annette. Why do we need a vaccine for American foul brood specifically?
Well, vaccines have proven to be extremely effective in the prevention of diseases across different animals, humans, livestock, our pets. And over the years, we have seen how vaccination or prevention of disease particularly can just increase productivity, can increase production in production animals, in livestock, whether they're chickens or cows. And there are different ways to prevent diseases, but vaccines are one very powerful tool that every person should have access to, we feel, if they so choose, to prevent diseases. And in honeybees, just like any other animal, we find diseases, and we find a whole bunch of diseases, whether they're bacterial infections like American foul brood or European foul brood, another very damaging bacterial infection, or whether they're viral infections like deformed wing virus, or fungal infections like chalk brood. They're out there and they are impacting our hives, and they're limiting the production capability of hives, and the hive health goes down. And I'm, every beekeeper can tell a story about that. And despite the fact that beekeeping has been around for thousands of years, and we are relying on bees in large numbers to help us with food production, honey production, crop production, feed production. It's used in medicine. It's the products are just, they touch in clothes, and they touch every part of our lives. We're not providing the same tools to prevent diseases to beekeepers. And we wanted to change that. And that's when we decided, we have vaccines for other animals. Why don't we do the same for honeybees? Why don't we provide this non-chemical tool to help beekeepers protect their animals, their livestock, their livelihood?
Mhm. So thank you for that. The American foul brood, by the way, is something that a lot of people listening and watching right now won't even be familiar with. So as you mentioned, we've been keeping and managing honeybees for thousands of years. When did foul brood show up, and why would it be important at all to address it? And Nate, you want to take that one?
I'd be happy to take that one. As I understand it, American foul brood showed up in the early 20th century, so 1919 aughts, something a little maybe a little bit past that. And it's only called American foul brood because it was studied here. But we know this disease to be worldwide, similar to European foul brood. It's not just isolated to Europe, but that's where it was studied. So that's a little bit about where the name came from. And one of the reasons beekeepers might not be aware of it, despite it being prevalent if you look at the hives tested in Canada, in the US, they found the spores of Penobacillus larvae, the bacteria that actually causes American foul brood. In the hives that were looked at in these published studies, it was over 50% of them found these spores present. So one of the things we started to dig in and look into is the subclinical versus the clinical case. So these spores are present, and when a hive is weakened, stressors from we all know honeybees are stressed for a number of different reasons: pesticides, migratory patterns, things of that nature. We start to see more clinical cases of this AFB pop up of American foul brood. But the spores that cause it, we're seeing it in a large number of hives across North America, but you can't see it with the naked eye. You have to test for it. And yeah, so that might be someone's, why someone hasn't seen AFB directly in their hive.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you mentioned that, by the way, when it gets to clinical levels requiring treatment. So it is prevalent in the hives, and of course subsists, we know, for decades in your comb and other parts of the hive, which is why it's tough to get rid of. And a lot of people may have seen it, but as you said, you don't see it with the naked eye unless it's extreme, and then you get into rope testing and things like that. And then we have field test kits for that, right? So there is a difference in vaccinating and then in treatment, because there are treatment options for low levels. Which of you would like to talk about treatment levels versus vaccination and why one would be preferred over the other?
I could touch on that.
Okay.
I think most of the options for beekeepers right now are treatments rather than preventative options.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's one of the mindset shifts that happens with the vaccine is you're using this as a preventative option. And for AFB, preventative is better anyway, because if you're getting to those clinical levels, those management options are very limited. It's either burning that hive, that gear, which no one enjoys doing that, and or trying to use antibiotics, which have bigger consequences. They're affecting the gut microbiome of bees. If you're a honey producer, you now have a withdrawal period you have to deal with. It's just an antibiotic resistance that we're perpetuating. So those options aren't ideal anyway, but AFB also targets larvae in their first 48 hours after they hatch, which is right, there are constantly, like during the appropriate season, there are constantly first instar larvae in your hive, and to be constantly treating to try to protect them from something, it's nearly impossible. And so a vaccine that is priming their immune system, so when they hatch, they are ready to fight it. And it takes that work away from the beekeeper. These larvae are just hatching and they're ready to take care of themselves. Is a cool shift from a treatment to the vaccines kind of purpose, and more of a preventative mindset, which is kind of the approach we take with all of with our pets and ourselves. And so hopefully that mindset shift sets in for this industry too.
Yeah,
And I'm glad
think the antibiotic use is just really in aquaculture becoming more and more of a problem, because like Amy said, it's not only does it end up in the food chain and affects us down the road, or your animals down the road when they eat the feed that was exposed to antibiotics, but the issues with antibiotic resistance is, and beekeepers are seeing it. And then for the last 40 years, antibiotic use was very, because it was the only option against these diseases, and also a reason why many beekeepers haven't seen American foulbrood in 40 years, or not a lot, because it's suppressed. It's in there, but with the antibiotics, it's suppressed. And at some point, the bacteria don't respond to these antibiotics anymore. And we're seeing this happen. And like what Nate said in the beginning of the 20th century, huge outbreaks and huge devastation to the industry. The Apiary Inspector Agency was founded because of American foulbrood, because it was such a big problem and impacted the industry. So the risk is still there, and we just need really, yes, with hygiene and good, management practices, all of that is true. I mean, we know quarantining of diseased hives or quarantining at-risk hives is very effective to limit the spread, but it's also very costly. That the almonds don't wait, the blueberries don't wait, until you're out of quarantine with your hives, and so having these tools available, we hope is really giving this industry a boost.
And Amy did hit on something that is meaningful to a lot of backyard beekeepers, which most of my audience consists of, by the way. The types of hives that are coming out now, a lot of them are polymers, they're polystyrene, and we talk about when they hit a certain level, American foulbrood gets discovered, and we have to burn the hive. That is not a very good way to manage something that when it burns is going to create a bunch of toxins as well. So a vaccine would, of course, avoid that. The other thing that listeners should understand is that if they do go the route for treatment, and the problem is these antibiotics have to continue to be treated. In other words, there's never a point at which you've arrived, you defeated it, and now this equipment is good to go. You start that treatment, it continues, and that, of course, is the way our state Department of Agriculture dictates that it has to be managed. So I see the vaccination route being a huge advantage for some of these more elaborate hive configurations with materials that can't be disposed of if they did have a heavy dose of foulbrood.
Yeah, this year in Oregon, I found out that they can't burn anything there that's been painted. So any of their woodenware, even that has been painted, that they would need to burn to get rid of, that's not allowed in that state. So that's a good point.
So what do they do?
I think they use kind of blowtorch and try to burn the insides of it, but
burn the inside of your plastic beehive?
Well, in a woodenware case.
Okay. But that's interesting too, that the paints are, because they are a plastic, for example, if we're dealing with acrylics, which are very popular now.
Yeah.
So let's get on to how new are vaccines for bees? This is the first time a vaccine that's been developed for any insect, is that correct?
That's correct.
And specifically the honeybee, because of its profound impact on our economy worldwide when it comes to agriculture. So when did this even become a possibility?
Not that
And
long ago. It's probably 10 years ago, something like this. Researchers across the world, or it was believed that insects don't have an immune system. And for a vaccine to be effective, you need to stimulate an adaptive immune system, which generates antibodies that is very specific against the disease. And not only is there no immune system, there's certainly nothing as fancy as an adaptive immune system with antibodies. Now, insects usually don't live 30 years, so they don't necessarily need a memory that long. But researchers didn't think that this was even an option for insects or honeybees. And it wasn't until maybe 15 years ago that researchers they realized that when you expose the queen to a pathogen that she can't get, like Amy said, these are larval diseases, these are brood diseases. The queen is not going to get sick from it to the extent we know, or the worker bees are not going to get sick, but they see the disease. But if the queen sees the disease, the next generation is less likely to get sick. And so people are saying, well, wait a minute, that only works if you have an immune system. There must be something in these animals that allows them to be protected from a disease. And they started looking into this. What could this be? And found this mechanism that exists where the queen transports or passes on the information to the larva and the next generation. And based on that discovery, researchers in Finland and my co-founder, Darja Freitag, set out to say, well, let's see if we can really find out what's going on here. And that research, that's when the idea was born. That was probably 2015, 2016. There should be an opportunity to develop this in a vaccine. But then it took, of course, a team of people that found that technology and this idea that was tucked away at a university and said, wait a minute, we let's try this. We know, even though people said that this, might very likely to fail, to develop a new product, it takes a long time. But yeah, that's when we came together and started the company and said, let's work with the regulator, let's work with the government to see if we can make a difference here. But it's very new. It's really very new, and it's the first of its kind.
And so, being new, when was it first authorized to be used on bees here in the United States, or I believe it's the US and Canada?
There was December 29th, 2022. But we didn't learn about it until January 3rd, when everybody came back from the holidays. We received an email that it was that we received the license and the market authorization to go forward. And then we worked with the Canadian equivalent to the USDA that reviews animal vaccines and is responsible. So the office in the US as well as in Canada, all animal vaccines, whether it's a dog or a cat or a chicken, will go through this agency for review, and they look at efficacy, at purity, at identity. So everything that they would do for a regular livestock vaccine, all of that review, we had to show all the data and all the proof and paperwork, pages and pages and pages, as you can imagine. Yeah, so for Canada, I think it was September 28th or 26th of 2023. So yeah, in the US, it has been available since last spring. And in Canada, we got the approval in the fall.
So do we have any idea the number of vaccinated queens that are out there in the United States right now? Nate is
yeah, it's probably somewhere around 9,000 9,000 vaccinated queens in hives right now.
And where are those? Are you doing work with University of Georgia? Or
We
Dr. Delaplane, did he have some part in finding test
we
yards?
we did, so we had for 2 years past 2 years we've been working with Keith Delaplane and his team here at the University of Georgia. We didn't have, in the beginning, we didn't have our own hives or our own bee yards to do the research. So we worked with a lot of universities and a lot of researchers, also USDA. That's where we met Amy. She was a researcher on the project for 2 years before joining us. And yeah, so we're working with different universities, and the university here and Keith Delaplane's lab is just amazing, just incredible, from the research power that they have, and just great experience. Yeah.
So then, Amy, are you wearing multiple hats, or did you leave one organization to join this one? How's it going?
Yeah, so I worked for the USDA for about 6 years at the Tucson, the Carl Hayden Bee Research Lab, and then I worked at the lab that's in Davis, California, as well. And while I was working there, we collaborated. The labs I was working with collaborated with Dallin to get some trials done in some different contexts. And in Tucson, the weather is a little bit more bee friendly for longer of the year. So we ran some trials when they couldn't. And then I decided to join Dallin full time when the product was being launched in 2022. So I don't work for the USDA anymore, but it definitely led me here.
Yes.
And
So
I help
you're
with a lot of our trials now too. So it's been
okay.
helpful to work with the vaccine for this long.
Now, there are options when it comes to vaccinating queens. Based on your website, it says that you can buy the vaccine itself and produce your own queen candy, or buy queens that are actually vaccinated. And on this website, it also lists those breeders that are selling vaccinated queens. Is one method or avenue to getting vaccination in your apiary better than the other? Why would you choose one over the other?
So, my favorite beekeeping answer, it all depends. As it goes, we've partnered with a number of great producers, and Amy has been out there personally to sort of show them the process, so they are top notch. But it really depends on how many queens you want to vaccinate, since the minimum manufacturing amount is 50 doses per vial. So unless you're doing 50 queens at a time, it probably makes sense to go with a producer that's already producing them for you. To that end, we also have some really clever genetics that are available, from Russian queens to Italian, Polines, things of that nature. So you might be searching out based on genetics, as well as the being vaccinated. But I have a number of beekeepers who are talking with their clubs, and they say, "Hey, we want to try this here locally. We want to stay on top of it." So even if you aren't just doing but maybe 10 or 25 queens, you can go out and find somebody in your club who's also doing the same thing. I think we're seeing more and more beekeepers take on this process of rearing their own queens because they want to be on top of it. And so they do have access to this at a level where they can do the vaccination themselves.
Mhm.
And it's one of the things we offer as a company is that training and doing a one-on-one session, whether it's virtual or you need in-person help to kind of figure out how to make it work for your operation. So even on those small scale settings like clubs, sharing 50 doses and vaccinating 50 queens all together and then sharing. There is a way, and we don't want anyone to feel deterred from the process. It's very much a contact us and we will figure it out and we'll get you pointed in the right direction.
Mhm.
And that's not a line. It's literally us. It's me and Amy. Like you contact.
Yeah, you're talking to them.
Yeah, you're talking to the people right now. We
Okay.
will, we'll get on the phone with you, get on a Zoom, whatever it is.
So have you noticed any variation in efficacy depending on the line of queens that you use, or are they all kind of performing the same?
I think in the clinical trials, Annette, you can speak to this if you'd rather, but in the clinical trials and efficacy trials, multiple lines were used and no differences based on line were seen. So
Okay. So let's describe the process for the layperson. We're not getting out needles and injecting our queens. So how does the queen end up being vaccinated? Who would like to describe that process?
I think that's my realm. So the vac as if you know bees, you know that queens don't really take care of themselves or eat on their own. So the vaccine is actually mixed into queen candy, that fondant-like sugar that's used as queen sugar plugs in queen cages. Just that it's also used in the shipping boxes that are sent when queens are shipped to feed attendants. So that same candy is mixed with a vaccine, and then workers are exposed to the vaccine and they consume that. It works its way through their system and into their hypopharyngeal glands, which we have really cool like confirmation photos of that. We like fluorescently marked the bacteria and added it into that sugar candy and then dissected out the different parts of the bee so you can see the bacteria actually working, the vaccine working its way through the bee system, which from a science point of view, I just think is very cool. It's very confirming. Like Nate mentioned earlier, you can't see bacteria. And so to be able to see it fluorescently marked is really cool. But so it gets into the workers' hypopharyngeal glands, and that's how they feed it to the queen. So it is orally fed to the queen via workers. And then it goes through the queen's system into her ovaries. It's actually attached to a protein called vitellogenin. That's an egg yolk protein, and it's in all animals, but honeybee queens actually have a really high abundance of that protein. And so it's pretty easy for the vaccine particles to be able to latch onto that protein and make it all the way into her ovaries and into her egg yolk. And then as the larva is developing in that egg, they are exposed and their immune systems are primed to fight off that pathogen when they hatch.
Okay, so now I have my vaccinated queen in my hive and she flies away. And but she did lay eggs, and of course they take those eggs and start to produce an emergency queen. Will that queen also carry that protection?
She would be protected as she was developing, and as an individual, she would be protected, but her offspring would no longer have that protection, as far as we know. It's an exposure method. We're not genetically modifying anything, and so it ends with her. That queen does need to be exposed in order to pass it on to her offspring.
Okay, so then I'm going to throw another monkey wrench in there. So she lays drone eggs from the vaccinated queen. Do those drones carry any benefit when they mate with queens at drone congregation areas?
We haven't really looked into drones as they are involved in this process, but again, they would be protected as they were developing, but they were not genetically modifying. It's not being stored in their system in any way that they would reproductively be able to pass it on in their genes. So every new queen has to be vaccinated individually.
So the word is, do not let your queen fly away.
Yeah, do a lot of swarm prevention.
So how about shelf life of the queen? Is this good for the rest of her life?
Annette, do you want to do that one? Or?
We don't know yet how long it lasts. It's a dead bacteria. It's completely inactivated. And like Amy said, the queen takes it up and stores the pieces of the bacteria, and then they're transported into the ovaries. Once that is depleted, once no more of it can go to the ovaries and the eggs are laid, then it's done. You would have to revaccinate. Now, how long that process takes, if it's a year, if it's 9 months, if it's different between different queens, we don't know yet. We're looking into that to retest after a year, to retest after 2 years or so, to develop diagnostic tests, so we can go out into the field and say, yep, this is still, your hive is still good after a year. But we're really at the beginning of opening up this new space of insect health, where there's a lot of room and a lot of questions to be answered and advances to be made.
So the other question is, the vaccine itself, for those that buy the 50 dose minimum, what kind of care do they have to exercise to keep that good to go? Does it have to be refrigerated? Is it very limited? Is once the vaccine's made, is it only good for 30 days or something? What are the limitations of the vaccine itself?
Right. So these limitations, they're regulatory limitations. So the regulator says, unless you have shown shelf life and have tested over several years what the efficacy of this, or the potency is of this vial, will give you 18 months shelf life. So it's an arbitrary but set number by the government. And so for us, it's 18 months. And also, unless you have tested it with certain prescribed tests that we need to develop, the regulator will say it has to be refrigerated. So these are standards that are not that don't necessarily have anything to do with the product itself, but with the regulatory framework that we fall into. So right now it's refrigerated, and it's the shelf life is 18 months. Okay.
So when someone orders they contact Nate and they say, hey, I need that vaccine, what's the turnaround like? Is it there ready to go, or are we timing it for spring? I know a lot of southern states, they're in queen production now. So what time of year, what kind of turnaround would they expect?
So we want to make sure we follow the correct regulatory processes. And so if you contact us and want to get something sent to your state, we sort of handle the paperwork on the back end and get it shipped from the manufacturer. But we cautiously say 1 to 3 week lead time. It's better to know sooner rather than later. But it's a pretty straightforward process.
Okay. So I already answered my drones. Oh, after you vaccinate them, are they still considered organic? Does it have an impact on those who have ratings that they're concerned about?
Well, it's there. From all our understanding of the regulations, they are indicated for organic aquaculture because there are no additives, there are no preservatives, there are no chemicals that we put into the vaccine to alter it in any way. So it's a natural product at the end of the day. It's an inactivated bacteria. So yes, it can be used in organic aquaculture.
So my next question is, the vaccine is still undergoing final approval, like it's a conditional approval right now, is that right?
That is correct.
Can we explain what that means, and at what point would you expect to get final approval?
Right. So a conditional approval is a accelerated mechanism that the regulator use in for high unmet needs or limited markets, and if there's no other product out there. Because some of the tests that you have, some of the analytical tests that you have to do for stability can take very, very long, as I just described. You have to develop the tests, the specific tests. It can take years to get there. And particularly if you have a completely novel product, you can't just go to a catalog and order things. You have to really start from scratch. And so the regulator says, okay, we believe, we trust the data that you've shown that first of all, it's safe. Safety is the highest level. And then you have to show also efficacy. And the tests that you have to do for efficacy and for safety identity, sterility, that there's nothing else in there, that there's nothing dangerous in the vaccine, is the same that you have to do for full licensure. There is no difference whatsoever. The only difference is what is called a potency test, where you show with a specific test method that every batch in your manufacturing is identical, that there are no variations. And we do that too, but with a different test method. And for full approval, the regulator requires a specific test method. So basically, everything is the same from efficacy testing, from safety testing, except that one manufacturing requirement that, as such, has nothing to do with the performance of the product, or shouldn't.
Okay. So do we know nationally how many cases of foul brood required destruction of hive equipment just in the past year, 2 years? This is a very difficult statistic to get a hold of. So what do we know?
And statistics in beekeeping in general are tough to get a hold of, because states operate independently. Sometimes they communicate. And to a certain extent, there's a bit of beekeeper guilt or shame sort of wrapped up in reporting that, you might have discovered American foul brood, and it's not necessarily on the beekeeper. There really shouldn't be any stigma attached to it, because as we understand it, these spores are present and they take decades to kill off, and your hive could have robbed out somebody else's unattended equipment. I think I've compiled where I attended meetings, and the state beekeeper, the state apiarist, put some numbers on a slide. I sort of collated a few of those, but I think it's tough to know. Amy, what's been your experience with that?
Very similar. It's hard to kind of get beekeepers to admit if they've seen it. And honestly, I think there's also an education gap in being able to identify American foul brood versus European foul brood, or, parasitic mite syndrome sometimes can look very similar to these bacterial pathogens. And so I think it goes underreported. And there's probably more of it than we think, but I also think there's more spores in the environment than we think as well. Like Nate was talking about earlier, those subclinical levels of AFB hanging out, waiting for your hive to be stressed by something else, and being able to work their way back into the feeding cycle and get fed back to a larva. And, it only takes less than 100 spores to make a larva sick, and then that turns into 2 billion spores, and then you have an outbreak. Yeah, I think numbers wise, it is kind of a guessing game, but I do think the risk is still prevalent.
Because we do have, as you mentioned, beekeepers are worried about it largely because they don't understand what it is and what that impact could be. And it's because we haven't had profound cases of it for a while, at least in my state. So I think in some ways they're becoming relaxed when they should not be.
Right.
I think, how accurate do you feel the field tests are for AFB and EFB?
Ooh, I think there can be some user error with those. I know the EFB one, I did my master's degree on studying European foul brood, and I think like those, you're not supposed to use your most sick looking larva. You're supposed to use larvae that have just started to turn yellow and are starting to look ill, because that's when it's at its highest level. And I think people see the scales or the really gross black brown larvae that are dead, that are just now a carcass and aren't actually that bacteria has moved on from there now. And they use that to test, and they're like, nope, it's fine.
Guilty of that.
European foul brood, I know the European foul brood test kits there's a learning curve, and being able to identify a larva that looks healthy but's just a little bit yellow also takes some experience. And I think like workshops on using those tools are probably something that the especially less experienced beekeepers could benefit from. I'm not exactly sure how the American foul brood test kits work, but if it's looking for spores, it's probably a little bit easier. I've heard that it's a little bit easier than the European foul brood ones.
The kit's easier?
The kit's just easier to the protocol is the same for both, but I think
Yeah.
you can't mess it up as easy with American foul brood.
And I just want to take a second to comment to viewers and listeners. If you're off the radar and you're not reporting that you have an apiary and you don't get inspected and you may not know what you're looking at, you can get those kits and do your own testing and watch detailed videos and instructions on how to do that. And that way, when you finally do realize that you might have something, now it's time to engage that control and reach out to experts at that point, because this is our problem. And I know you guys already know this, but a lot of beekeepers don't want anybody in their yard and their property and their business. And
Yep.
I'm glad you're covering that. In fact, the fact that you mentioned going after not necessarily the most grotesque cell in there and doing a rope test and doing your tests on that, I'm glad you mentioned that a lot of people don't. So I'd like to encourage people to register their hives, but I know I get angry comments the minute I say that. And it's just the nature of beekeepers. But the other thing is, Nate, were you about to say something else? Just did I cut you off?
It might be more of an observation. I had heard that well, to Amy's end about the AFB test kits, because as I understood it, they for a long time they kind of snuck underneath the radar with their registration. And for a while this past summer, I was under the impression that they got pulled from the shelves because they had to re-seek registration under a different category. So for a while there, and I don't know where it's at now, but it could be difficult to test for AFB. And it's just all the more reason to have, ounce of prevention, pound of cure sort of thing. But that I didn't
So
want to
you
comment.
think they may not currently be available?
When I talked to beekeepers about this, they were still able to find them on Amazon, but yeah, there was some information that came out last year. So maybe I can find something and send that back to you.
Yeah,
Because
please do. And again, those watching and listening, there'll be updated information and links down in the video description. And those listening on podcast will also find that information down in the description of the podcast. So that's important to know, because those test kits have a shelf life. So I don't want people
they
jumping
do.
on second, level shopping groups and ordering in
Right.
these test kits, because you could get one that's already expired, particularly if they're not currently being approved or there's some work to be done. So I'm glad to hear you talk about that. So people just can't look at it. Are there closing thoughts? What would each of you like to share as we kind of wrap things up today, thinking about the backyard beekeeping community? We'll start with you, Nate. This is your chance.
It's my shot. No, I've been beekeeping for 15 seasons. I've been a backyard beekeeper, small scale beekeeper, commercial beekeeper. I've kept hives in Washington State, down to Florida, and in the Northeast. And as far as where Dallin is with this product and this technology, I don't see any reason not to try it out in your own operation. We've proved efficacy, or we've shown efficacy, and then there's no negative side effects to it. And it's the first thing to happen to come out to really be a prevention. Every other high product I've added in there has just been designed to either kill or strip something away from the bees. So I really like where this is, inserted into the pipeline of the bees development and that sort of thing. But yeah, just I've clamshelled and looked at a lot of hives, and I stand by it. I stand behind it. So no reason not to try it.
Okay. So Amy, you voted with your career. So what are your closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a really exciting tool and an exciting like progression of how we think about bees. I've had people ask me if bees have brains. Like there are parts of our population that don't quite even grasp that bees are animals and that they are a living thing that need to be taken care of, and we manage them in these boxes, and it is our responsibility to take care of them when we do that. And they are animals, and they deserve to be taken care of in the same way that we think about the rest of our livestock. And we're extremely reliant on these animals. And so having a tool and a platform for a tool to help in future ways is very exciting to me. It's just one step up. Bees deserve to be taken care of. So I get excited about it. In my 8 years of beekeeping, this is the most exciting new thing that I've gotten to see. So, and I'm really glad I get to be a part of helping Beekeepers incorporate it. So.
And I do, before I get to Annette, I want to back up a little bit. Even though they may not see classic foul brood, American or European foul brood in the brood area, having a vaccinated stock may improve the overall well-being and performance of those bees. What is there? I mean, it's not just stop them from having a full-blown outbreak of American foul brood in their brood, but if they were vaccinated, does it have another benefit? For example, if there were some sublethal or low-level foul brood present, is there evidence that the bees live longer, are more prolific? What do we know?
Well, I mean, as we spoke before, there are many, many, many stressors right now on honeybees, whether it's diseases, whether it's pesticides, whether it's predators, a whole slew of things that are thrown at them. And if you have a cold and all of a sudden, something else comes along, you just you just give up. You're less likely to be able to fend off other things when you're already sick with something. So if you take that one thing out of the equation, you're very likely better prepared to deal with other things. Honeybees, and Amy can talk much better about this than I can, have a whole slew of tools that they can use to deal with diseases. On a colony level, they can increase temperature, like a fever. On an individual level, but if they can't do that because they're weakened because of a subclinical case of American foul brood, these mechanisms don't work as well anymore. But if you protect them from one, the hope is that these other these natural mechanisms that the colony has and the individual bee has, grooming behavior, all of those things, that they can be much more efficient to protect the colony. So hopefully we will see those improvements overall. And this is not the last vaccine that we will develop. We want to provide the beekeeper with the options to say, oh, in my region this year we have European foul brood. We heard about it. It also, once you have preventative mechanisms and you can do something, my hope is that there will be more openness about sharing this information by saying there is a wave of European foul brood coming. Let's protect our hives. And the exciting thing for me, we set out to develop a honeybee vaccine. So we can give it to the industry, that we can give it to the hobbyists, that we can give it to the people that care about these animals with their life, with their passion, and depend on them. What we didn't expect, like Amy said, a lot of people don't know how important these animals are for us, for our survival globally. And all of a sudden, when the news came out, the attention that we got, that the vaccine got from popular press, from journalists that called it gave us an opportunity to tell the world, you need to look at these people. You need to look at these beekeepers that keep us alive. You have to pay attention. And that to me was a side effect gift to us that it allowed us to really highlight how critical these animals are and how critical the work is that beekeepers do, whether it rains, it snows, it's in the summer moving around their hives, and caring about their animals. So that's something that I'm really happy that we are able to do this and able to participate in this story.
And I know someone is sitting there looking at their computer wondering all this time, how much does it cost? So a 50 dose, right? If you're vaccinating your own, you get 50 is the minimum. What is that going to cost the beekeeper?
Like Nate likes to say, it depends.
You can't say it depends. We need hard numbers here. People are planning their finances. Just
I think we
ballpark.
will
What?
find a way to make it work. It's a new product. We understand that they're not just large commercials with tens of thousands of hives.
Right.
And whether it's a queen bought from a queen producer or the vaccine, that they are different scenarios, or in some countries you'll have to get a veterinary prescription, where in the US we we're able to reason with the regulator not to put up that burden. But that those scenarios will make the price vary. It is a novel product. It is a limited manufacturing size to this at this time. It's a novel process, so all of those things contribute to the price. So it's a biologic, it's a regulated product. It's not made in a garage, but by licensed manufacturers that are inspected by the USDA. So all of that contributes to the price. So it's definitely more expensive than a vitamin, or that is off the shelf. But we try whatever we can to work with the beekeeper. Is that correct, Nate?
Yes, we do. We try everything we can to work with the beekeepers. So it's, and evaluating, the benefit that it's going to bring. That's a big part of what we'll be doing this season, in a lot of different apiaries across the country. So, but I would say if you want to get a handle on it, check out the website. You can see the different producers and what they have. And if you want to talk seriously, give me a call.
Are they? Oh, no frivolous phone calls. Okay.
No.
I want them all.
Are any of those producers posting their prices for vaccinated queens yet?
Mhm.
So what are they, $100 a queen?
Well, he's going to twist our arm by going way down the deep end there.
Well, I think somebody was advertising vaccinated queens for $100. Does that sound reasonable? Or is that low end, or?
Is that Canadian?
Yeah.
Oh no, that sounds inexpensive. What are they gonna?
Yeah,
Let me see.
Because people.
we don't influence that, and we don't say we're not part of that. What beekeepers do when they offer their queens. We deal, if obviously if there's a large volume of vaccine that they will purchase, we have more flexibility on setting pricing or discounting than if it's one vial, just from the handling costs that goes into it and the shipment, everything that's involved. But so it may vary between a large queen producer and an individual or bee club.
Okay.
I think the bee club route is a good one, because then you can,
Sure. Yeah. And they have a bunch of money they're just sitting on, wondering what to do with
I
it.
know.
I'm actually serious about that. There are bee clubs sitting on thousands of dollars and
Yeah.
wondering what they should do with their money. This is not a bad way to use it, I would say. So just in closing, again, I want to thank you all for your time and for sharing about this fantastic achievement. And I appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for having
Yeah.
us.
Absolutely. And there you have it, another episode of Interviews with Experts. Please don't forget to check the description for links and updated information. If you enjoyed this series, please subscribe for more. I'm Frederick Dunn, and this is the way to be.